Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What was wrong with the worst hotel room you ever had? A couple of weeks ago, I went on a weekend trip to London with a few friends. My friend booked everything, the coach to London, the hotel, anything that had to be booked he booked. The problem is that my friend is a bit of a cheapskate, so he decided to book a hotel a bit outside of London. I didn't really mind though because it was only 15 minutes by tube back into London. So, we went there, tired from the journey and wanting nothing but a shower and some place to just chill for an hour or so. We took the tube, and he made us get off at Upton Park. Once we got out it was evident that this was a fairly poor borough of London and I found this place to be an odd one for a hotel to be in, but I went with it anyway. We walked a bit and finally reached the road where the hotel was supposed to be. There was nothing but council houses there. When we reached the actual place, it too was a council house. And there was a distinct smell of weed around it. We tried to go inside, when a man ran towards us, shouting and screaming incoherently, until he realized we were his guests, when he suddenly lit up and beckoned us inside. We found ourselves in the living room. There was a whiff of burnt food around the place. There was a sofa, on which man was feeding a baby with a bottle, in front of it a crooked coffee table. There was a load of washing on an ironing board in the corner of this barren living room, and that was it. The man's wife suddenly showed up, showing us the first bedroom we had booked for 4 people. There were 2 beds, both with simple, brown sheets, no real duvet, just the covers. It was incredibly cold. The other room was shown to us. There were 2 larger beds, with actual duvets and cushions. In the corner stood a small table with a tray, on which there was a kettle and 2 coffee cups, both still half full of cold coffee. The TV that was mounted on the wall was half falling off, the wall was crumbling where the fitting was drilled into it. The floor was dirty and sticky, there were cobwebs absolutely everywhere. The house was full of people, some of them seemed to be living there, a few seemed to be other guests. There was no way to lock either of the rooms. I didn't visit the bathroom, but my friends told me it was the dirtiest toilet they ever went to and compared it to a portaloo at a busy festival on day 3. Needless to say, we left and found ourselves an actual hotel room. When we asked our friend how much he actually paid for this room, he said it was only £20. Not per person, in total. The moral of this story is probably not to trust your friends when booking hotels. And don't be too cheap. This happened over 10 years ago in Queensland, Australia. We went up to visit and go to the theme parks for the first time and arrived at our hotel room. The advertisement showed an awesome pool, palm trees, and people happy and playing. We arrived at a green pool, palm trees all dead, and no one in sight. We thought about leaving it, we are going to be out all the time anyway. We got our keys, and entered the room. There is this smell, I know this smell now, it's death. I work as a nurse, there is strange stains on the floor and small blood splatters on the wall very low down. I guess they thought leave it and let the stench of death and blood be part of the charm. The bathtub is terribly stained, the bed's not even made properly. It's so much worse than we could have ever imagined. We immediately called our travel agent. We started sending pictures, a lot of pictures, as at first she was in disbelief. 3 pictures in, with over 30 on the way, she calls us back. She has the general manager of the company on the phone. He called us from overseas himself. He informed us that they are sending the police to investigate, that all expenses for accommodation are being covered for 2 weeks at no charge. He himself suggests 5-star luxury condominium 2 hours north of our current location at a place called Molotovabad. We take this option and never go to the theme parks. I also spent my 16th birthday alone on the beach, because originally the holiday was for 10 days, not 14. But hey, I made friends with a nice girl on the beach, whose boyfriend turned up 2 days later. Was a very, very weird holiday. I eventually went back to the theme parks 4 years later, 3 days into the trip wet and wild. I sliced my hand open and required sutures. I don't go on holidays anymore. That was my last holiday. I'm now 32. Up by the Canadian border, in between time zones. So, your cell phone would switch time zones and occasionally charge you internationally if you made a call. The alarm clock reset to midnight if you hit the snooze button. And you couldn't use your phone for an alarm clock because of the time zone thing. The bathroom door didn't close, and I was sharing the hotel with a coworker for a week. The security door lock thing was a loop of cable screwed to the door jamb. There were birds living on top of the air conditioner and a street light shining on them, so they chirped all night. And this was up in western North Dakota during the oil boom, so it was hundreds of dollars a night. Actually, the other hotels up there were just as bad for their own reasons. I'll type it out if anyone's actually reading this. Wilmington, North Carolina. The first night I was attacked by bed bugs. I went down in the morning and showed reception the hundreds of raised red bites all over me. They were not overly concerned and moved me to the room next door. I inspected the bed thoroughly, or so I thought. Next morning, my face was covered in bites. They moved me to another floor. The whole time making me feel as though I am an annoying winner because I didn't appreciate being mauled by bugs. A week later, the itchiness was so intense that I had been scratching my legs through a pair of stockings. I was sitting in a taxi, looked down at a pool of blood on the floor of the taxi and thought someone had died prior to me getting a ride. I then noticed the pool was dripping through my stockings from where I had attacked a number of bites on my leg. Have scars from the open sores to this day. Probably the Hotel Niralat in Panipat, India. I got put into a suite since I was a giant white guy, and they found that overly exciting. I had a magnificent view of a river next to the hotel which was constantly full of extremely poor people who were burning stuff to stay warm. The giant river mainly with an occasional floating body in it, sometimes human. Outside the hotel was a giant highway that was built above the city and another crowded road beside it. They piled all the dead dogs from the road in a giant pile next to the highway. Being a dog person, it was horrible, and reminded me of photos from World War II with dogs instead of people. The poor nearby residents would dig through the hotel waste and stand outside the hotel trying to sell things they picked out of it, and little cakes to be used during Diwali. The room itself was old, something out of the 80s, which is fine. Main thing I didn't like was that the bathtub had this giant spot of slime in the middle of it that we couldn't remove, smiley face. I would stand in the bathtub and wash myself with the giant bucket hoping for the best. At least the food/staff were fairly good, and the sound of Indian horns was always amusing. I was driving cross-country with my mother in the summer of '98, and we found a Sheraton Inn. Thinking it was a reliable name, we made reservations. When we got there, it turned out it was a knockoff motel. And even pulling in we could see it was a disaster and could smell the air was like breathing a mix of popcorn butter and week-old wet diapers. It was difficult to even inhale. Tired, and not being fussy at all, we decided to just make it work. We opened our room and were blasted with overwhelming mold smell. We went in and there were dead bugs everywhere and black wet spots all over the floor that were all molded. No worse than a camping cabin, right? We'll just deal. Until, my mom took the blanket off her bed and the mattress had holes all over and was stuffed with cockroaches feasting away on God knows what. At that point, my mother asked me to go to the office and get a refund, which I promptly did. They didn't even hassle me at all, so I guess it's pretty common. I was doing a clinical in another state and found a hotel I could rent a room at for $16 per night. Let me tell you, this room was worth the $16 and not a penny more. Stained sheets, nasty carpet, drunks wandering the halls all night, having random people attempt to enter my room multiple times because the owner forgot what room I was in. Fun times. The best was when my air conditioner died, so they moved me to another room. In that room the entire bathroom was coated in mold. So, my options were either the room that was so hot and humid I could barely breathe or the bathroom full of mold. It was a long 8 weeks. Bedbugs crawling all over me and my wife at 4 a.m. She woke up and turned on the light, started screaming. I woke up to see hundreds of little bugs on me. Couldn't just go get a new room as we were in Morocco, in a small town. The hotel overnight guy was not helpful. Put us in a deluxe room and told us to not worry about extra charge for nicer room. Left at 7 a.m. The wife has overly sensitive skin and almost immediately broke out in something like hives. Went to a doctor the next morning and was given pills that made her sick, but cleared up skin a bit. Doc had no English, and my French is bad, so it was hard to communicate. I broke out in hives later that day and didn't want to take pills as my wife was ill. After a bit I couldn't take it anymore and took pills. Got sick and was laid up for a full day, in a new hotel. Great trip. At my previous job I flew a lot all over the US. When I first started out I would stay at the cheapest hotel on Priceline, or Kayak, or whatever. This particularly bad hotel was in the wonderful land of Cleve, or at least just outside. I had just finished my work and drove the rental car to the hotel. It was more of a motor lodge. The pool locked off and I could smell a strong scent of fetid water. The office had wallpaper, but it was stained well from years of heavy smoking. Got my key and was ready for a shower. I opened the room and it smelled strongly of mothballs and carpet freshener. I hit the lights and it's a pretty rundown room, but not terrible. I opened the bathroom door and hit the lights. The shower/tub is filled with filthy colored water. There is a hole in the floor where the toilet was. It didn't stink too much, but I wasn't going to fish for the drain. I wasn't going to stay here anyway. I go to leave when I hear a rumble in the bath. Suddenly more fluid comes out of the faucet and shower head, the stink starts to make me retch. I pick up my bag off the bed when I see tons of black spots on the sheets. It's absolutely riddled with bed bugs. I practically ran out of that room. I go to the office and demand to know WTF. The lady there all of a sudden gets a sudden look of clarity. Oh, our sewer line went out, we had a plumber make a fix temporarily. Their plumber had installed a pump on the outgoing sewer line and had it diverting into the last room on the line until he could come and properly fix it tomorrow. I told them that was not only illegal but disgusting. They refunded me and I found a Homewood Suits down the road. When I got back to the office the next day I called the local health department. From then on I stayed in the Hilton brand chains. At the Jackson Euclid Economy Lodge in Salt Lake City, Utah. 3 weeks ago. The room smelled like someone poured out the wet juice from a smoker's pole in the floor. There were vomit stains on the carpet. The carpet wasn't vacuumed well. The window curtain was mildewed. There were fake mustaches stuck to the walls. Used ones. There was ejaculate on the cart. Tube-style TV, the TV was on the lamp outlet switch next to the door. There was a shot in the edges of the duct-taped broken toilet seat. The sheets had cigarette burns, the furniture was rotted particle board, not functional, one of the bed lamps was completely destroyed, only the lampshade material, no structural. At 12:30 a.m. There were 3 ladies in the parking lot actively servicing rooms. At 4 in the morning, I saw a crack deal not 50 yards from my room, and the day manager hassled me when I asked for a better room. I subsequently got a better room, it was like night and day, a room that looked like the Expedia picture. I was floored. Oh yes, the bathroom fan threw sparks. Did I mention the bed bugs? It was in a Best Western in South Dakota. I booked a non-smoking room. The sheets stank of cigarette smoke, like several people hid under the covers and smoked a carton. I complained to the desk, no rooms available and no housekeeping to change the sheets. They didn't even have sheets for me to change myself, or washer to launder the sheets that night. I ended up sleeping on the mini couch, which also stank. The next morning the hotel manager comes to see me about the previous night's complaints and accuses me of smoking in the room. This quickly escalated to the police officers being called. The police officers came in and listened to both sides, and one asked if he could look in my luggage. He goes through my stuff and takes my shirts out one at a time and smells them. My first thought, after I'm going to jail, was that the man was a pervert. He called his partner over and they whispered to each other, and the other police officer smelled one of my shirts and told the hotel manager that this guy doesn't smoke. I still got kicked out, but I got a refund, and the police officers hooked me up with a B&B closer to the university. I hate Best Western, but I like South Dakota. Many years ago, I was on a motorcycle trip through Canada around Lake Huron. While on a ferry to the North Shore, I learned that it was a Canadian national holiday, and that virtually all hotel/motel rooms were booked. With no better options, I continued along my route and onto the Trans-Canadian Highway, hoping to find any hotel or motel with vacancy. The vast number of deer/elk/polar bears crossing the highway at night made nighttime travel on a motorcycle quite risky, and the temperature was going to drop pretty low after dark. Finally, after passing through about 6 to 7 small towns and finding no vacancy anywhere, I happened upon a remote collection of buildings that could very generously be called a village. On the outskirts of the village, I spotted flashing neon. And below that neon, I spotted the word I had been looking for: vacancy. Pulling into the parking lot, I discovered that it was more than just a motel. It was a strip club, motel, and restaurant all in one. It was called Chickies, and it was both disturbing and a godsend. The owner, perhaps recognizing the concern on my face, gave me a quick tour of the last room available. With no better options, I took it. And it was exactly what I expected. The stained sheets, stained comforter, and dirty carpet were bad enough, but the glittery stripper mascara smeared across the bathroom mirror was the icing on the cake. Reflecting on the importance of getting my vaccinations up to date, I went straight to sleep and departed at first light the next morning. I later learned that Chickies offered an incredibly unique and enterprising service in the strip club. When customers became hungry during a lap dance, the stripper would get up, walk down to the restaurant, grill up a bacon cheeseburger, and serve it to you in the club. How this business managed to go under in rural Canada with such personalized service is beyond me. I still think the business model has serious potential and am surprised nobody has taken the ball and run with it. Oh man, although I'm late, this is a thread for me. I play and tour in a band that travels internationally all the time. This point is particularly applicable because, while the band can afford rooms for us, we are usually at the mercy of Priceline Express deals and never really know we're going to get it due to us staying within a budget. I have stayed in some amazingly charming hotels for $60, and some insanely gross ones for over $100. Stayed at Motel 6 in Wyoming when someone was stretching on the floor next to a bed, felt something cold and round under the bed, and pulled out a used syringe. Stayed at a hotel in Bangkok that was provided to us by the promoter. Opened our room to see about a dozen roaches scurrying across the floor. This was especially rough when we realized the following day, after sleeping in the roach room, that a room at the Hyatt would have been roughly $35. Our favorite chain hotels were La Quintas until we found bedbugs in one, in Arizona. We'll still stay at them because bedbugs can happen almost anywhere, but now we just hold a grudge. The guy at the front desk didn't care, even though we brought a bug in a cup for him to see, and it took a lot longer than you'd expect to get new rooms. Probably because he knew it didn't make a difference, we were staying in a literal picturesque hotel in Switzerland over this past summer. Nothing was wrong with the place, except when we were going up the stairs to our bank of rooms, a few of the guys saw something, like a red light, rush past us. They thought/think it was a ghost. I didn't see anything but had crazy dreams. There's a ton I am surely blanking on, but here's the best one. It's long but worth it. Summer 2012, we stayed at a Days Inn near LAX so that we could catch our flight the following day without trouble. It was a motel type, With all of the room's doors facing the parking lot, we were on the second floor. We got into our double room and the phone rang almost immediately. Our money guy answered the phone and the person on the other line said they were from the days in billing office. It was like 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that our card didn't go through when we were checking in and they needed to run it again. Money guy started reading the CC number off over the phone while me and another bandmate gave each other suspicious looks. After that was figured, someone pulled the blankets back on a bed to find literal rotten vegetables from a previous guest's burrito. Obviously bummed out, I went to call the front desk to ask for new sheets when I noticed the phone didn't work. It couldn't dial out. Strange. Me and the money guy decided we should make a run to a Walmart to buy some cheap sleeping bags anyway. We were flying to Australia the following day, during their winter, and none of us brought that stuff with us to LA. On our way, we stopped at the front desk to ask for new sheets for the bed. The lady said they didn't have any extra, full house that night. Which is insane in hindsight. Then we asked why the billing office called us and if we were okay to stay for the night. She was confused, but then said, "Oh yeah, they do that sometimes. You're fine." That was good enough for us. We left and got the sleeping bags. The next week or so went simply fine, until we were staying in Canberra and our money guy checked the bank account. We had been robbed blind. Someone spent literal thousands of dollars on candy, shoes, and money orders for a state prison in Florida. This made that particular hotel stay just awful. It was a Japanese-style inn/hotel thing. No beds, just mattresses, with no bed sheets. When I opened the cabinet to take out the blankets and pillows, out came a cockroach. The air conditioner was broken and leaking the entire time. Mind you that I was with 5 huge guys. It was hot. And guess what? The rooms next door had a scorpion and a spider. Hate that place. One time, I was driving across the country, the US. My car broke down in the tiniest town in the middle of the country. The people were not helpful, and it took searching to find someone actually willing to help me. Since it was such a small town, they didn't have the parts one needed and they needed to order them. It was going to take 3 days. All right, understandable. The guy who runs the shop points me to the only bed and breakfast in town. I go in and it's one of those ones where the person that runs it lives and their living room was attached to the front desk. It took a while before they even noticed anyone was there, no bell. So, I went to my room and I opened the door. I am in shock. Not only is there a multicolored shag carpet, but the multicolored shag carpet also runs up the entire wall behind the bed. The whole wall is covered in multicolored shag carpet. Then, having to use the restroom, notice there's no door. There were 2 of us traveling. Okay, so one has to really use the restroom and has to ask the other to leave the room so they can use the restroom. They offered a complimentary continental breakfast at this place. The only thing they had was a few individually wrapped danishes that expired months ago. Somewhere in Mississippi, sometime around 1999. I traveled in a van for work at the time. I saw a billboard for what was obviously a low-rent motel, but it was literally next to a topless joint, so figured why not? Went to topless joint for a while, bad, just really bad. Imagine a topless joint out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, now imagine the quality of entertainers, all 2 of them. When I went to check into a room, the office is separate from the motel. I asked about a wake-up call, guy says there's no phone in the room. Okay, whatever, $25 a night, can't expect too much. So, I get a key, he points me toward what is literally a cinder block dwelling with multiple doors. I go into the room, there is a bed, and a bathroom. And, nothing else. Nothing else besides cinder block walls. Literally. Again, I figured it's cheap, I'm here, go to sleep, get up early, lesson learned. Only we're not done. I get up the next morning to shower, turn on the water, and it runs brown. Now, I figure this room probably hasn't been rented in a while, or at least the water hadn't been run in a while. Little sediment in the pipes probably, right? And oh, it ran for probably 10 minutes and was still running brown/red. Moped the hell out, and that may have been the day I started deciding that some things in life are worth paying a little more for. This one time, while I was checking in, the minion at the front desk did not refer to me as sir, nor did he give me my complimentary slippers, nor my uplifting personalized compliment. Then they had the nerve to actually close the restaurant at its listed closing hours, rather than keeping it open for me. I'm a double platinum tier member, you bet your britches I went to corporate and had my whole stay comped. I'm never staying with that hotel chain again. I stayed in New York a couple of months ago with my friends. We were staying at a Hilton but had to get a different hotel that was cheaper for the next night, so my friend booked a room down the street. The entrance to the hotel was a long hallway with the front door wide open. It was pretty cold the days I stayed, and the elevator was only big enough for 3 people. I'll try to describe the room for you. As soon as you enter there are 2 beds to your right, a restroom to the left, and further ahead to the left is a small room/hallway. Anyways, we go into the room and above the second bed is a window. There is no glass, just a leopard print pillow duct taped in place of it. There's also a band-aid on the pillow. Above that is a pillow shoved into a smaller window. In the small hallway is a child-size mattress on the floor with a pillow with a nice size hairball on it. Above that is another window with a pillow duct taped to it. We were laughing so hard. We had gone to the state fair for the day and had booked a room at the hotel across the street from the exposition center. Genuinely charming hotel, and we had to book it months in advance. Spent a wonderful day at the fair with our toddler, headed to the room to get a good night's sleep before hitting the zoo in the morning. At 2 a.m. I was awakened by the sound of breaking glass and a crash that seemed to shake the building. Looked out the peephole and saw nothing amiss in the hallway, which was a little confusing. I chalked it up to a vivid dream and decided to pee and go back to bed. The bathroom door would only open a few inches, and once I turned the lights on I could see why. The entire bathroom ceiling had fallen. That's what was blocking the door and was resting on the tub, sink and toilet. The lights were hanging by the wires and the fan was hanging by conduit. Called the front desk and went round and round with the girl on the phone. She's repeating over and over that there isn't another empty room in the hotel, and I'm telling her that I know better than that and she needs to send maintenance up immediately and find us somewhere else to sleep. Maintenance arrives and promptly freaks out and radios the front desk. After the 4th or 5th, oh my god. I've never seen anything like this. She tells him to get off the two-way radio and call her on the phone. And yes, there was another room available for us, and we loaded our stuff up and headed to the other end of the property and bedded down for the rest of the night. Wound up with our room and a nice room service breakfast comped. Actually, they tried to charge us for the meal, but she decided it wasn't worth it to argue the point in front of crowds of people waiting to check in. Different hotel, same city. Several years later, a hotel room air conditioner that was improperly installed wound up giving me a pretty nasty shock when I turned it off. The condensation was dripping onto the carpet in front of the unit. I had noticed the carpet was wet but figured one of the kids had spilled something. Turns out the ground wire was sitting on the wet carpet, and when I turned it off the thing nearly knocked me off my feet. In Costa Rica, specifically the Nicoya Peninsula, I stayed in a place made completely from concrete except for the furniture. The electrical conduit was run over the walls, and every corner was coated in accumulated dirt. The bathroom was no different, even in the shower that was mostly ground level, so water got all over the floor. I also got to share it with a massive spider, so that was fun. Overall, not the grossest place I've slept, but the grossest hotel. To top it all off, I was woken up in the morning by howler monkeys yelling in the trees. I had a race outside a small town in Texas. There weren't many hotel/motel options and Airbnb wasn't around yet. So, I booked a Motel 6 for like $30 a night. It was supposed to be a non-smoking room with a small kitchen. We show up to check in and they are oversold and out of non-smoking rooms. I contemplated looking somewhere else, but I remember booking this place because it was the only option. We get to the room, and it absolutely reeks of smoke. The bed, and especially the pillow, are the worst. I was sleeping in an ashtray. I got really sick and barely slept. My race the next day was miserable. I have slept in cheap places all over the world and that was my worst experience by a lot. A hostel I got in San Francisco through Booking.com, and while I wasn't going to rate it super bad, given it was cheap and decent for the area, service was bad. Checking in was fine and the guy was helpful. The room was kind of meh, clean but dingy. There was a sink and mirror in the room with an okay TV. The window faced an alcove in middle of building facing other windows, could be a spot to crawl out on, nothing bad happened there. Toilet and shower rooms were door wide, and separate. Good luck in the shower not getting wet that you need dry. But checking out was awful. When I left there was a German couple waiting too. No one was there, we both looked around, called out and then pressed the button for service, and waited. Wait another few minutes, press the button again. There are no directions posted anywhere about checkout procedures, so we wait. Nothing after the second time. See, is the back room some sort of activity area was closed off with a curtain. Wait. Press the button again. The three of us were there for at least 15 minutes waiting till some lady stormed out to yell at us that we could just leave our card keys. I shouted back we didn't know and there was no sign. Lady gives us a dirty look and storms away. Don't stay at the Europa in San Francisco. My nicest cheap there was the Monarch Hotel. 1-star resort on my senior trip in Punta Cana. Partied till late, went to sleep, woke up to use the bathroom and go back to sleep. 10 minutes later I heard the shower running. I questioned to myself, it's 4 in the morning, who's in the shower, no light is coming from the bathroom. I go to see what's going on and it turns out gallons of water is gushing out of the pot lights in the ceiling. A small waterfall coming from around the lights. I open the door, there's a security guard nearby. I flag him down, he doesn't speak English, I show him what's going on, he laughs and walks off. I moved the toiletries out from under the fountain that's now in the bathroom and went back to sleep. It had stopped when I woke up. Also, a side note about that resort, a friend of mine discovered that the room key they gave him was a universal key to the entire building. Every room. Somewhere in northern Paris. I got edgy when the guy at the front desk wanted my car keys as insurance. I refused. As I walked down the corridor to my room, my shoulders touched both walls. The room was just big enough for 2 single beds with space to squeeze between. Everything was broken: phone, aircon, toilet, shower. My wife wanted to leave. It reminded me of the hotel from Coming to America. I convinced her to lay down, go to sleep, and we'd leave early in the morning. On laying down I saw the blood stains on the ceiling. I decided not to tell her. 5 minutes in, a knock at the door. My parents had similar quality accommodation and were leaving. The concierge didn't even look surprised when we left. Was heading back home from Washington with my parents and we stopped at an Eco-No Lodge in Oregon. Their room had a queen-size bed and it adjoined to the room I was sleeping in, which had a pull-out couch and a chaise lounge. My parents had already gone to bed while I took a dip in the pool. Came back, showered, dried off, and pulled out the sofa bed. When I went to sit on the edge of the bed, I fell right through. I lifted the mattress and 80% of the springs holding the frame together were missing. I was so tired, I thought, leave it, and grabbed the sheets to make a bed on the floor and was even more appalled by curly black hairs in them. I don't know if they were pubes or pet hair, but they were now unusable as well. So, I ended up trying to sleep on the chaise lounge with a damp towel as covering, but since the room was right next to the vending machines in the hall, I just sat watching King of the Hill. Then on our next stop in Reading, we pulled into Motel 6, and I saw this white Bronco that has the word SUPRCRSEKR scratched into the rusty back passenger side door. I laugh and hope that whoever Super Cracker is, they aren't going to steal any of our stuff. Just as I get out of the car, I see a man that looked like he was straight out of Deliverance. Missing teeth, meth face, skin looked like he rolled in the mud, equally filthy overalls with no shirt, you get the idea. He walks past us and goes to the Bronco, and I think, of course. He sits on the brick wall by his Bronco and looks like he's fiddling around with a drill and a weed whacker. I figure maybe he's just the groundskeeper/handy person and try to shrug it off. Cut to later that night, I'm too paranoid with Super Cracker still out there to go to sleep and keep peeking out the window every 5 to 10 minutes. I can hear stomping upstairs, sounds like someone chasing people around. Eventually, I see flashing lights. Cops are there. Super Cracker is sitting in the back of the car, cuffed. I put my ear to the door to listen to the police officers talking, and all I could make out was, that woman said he came at her with a drill. She's scared to death. Next morning, I begged my dad to either stop being a cheapskate or just let me drive through the nights. Stayed someplace in Long Island after a flight across the country. We had reservations, but upon arriving I don't think anyone had ever made a reservation at this place before. There were more patrons being entertained in the parking lot than there were staying in rooms. Rooms of course had hourly rates, and there was bulletproof glass between us and the hotel clerk. The wallpaper in our room was stapled in spots where it was peeling off. There were stains on the lampshades, and it appeared the bedspreads may have been stained with blood. The window had plywood over part of it if I remember correctly. Without anywhere else to go, we slept there. We still laugh about this place. It was truly horrifying. I will never let him live it down. He still owes me a decent night in Long Island if that's actually possible. In my sophomore or junior year of college, my girlfriend, our friend, her boyfriend, and I attempted to drive up to Tennessee to stay in a cabin for spring break. On the way, the car broke down near Tullahoma. The mechanic that towed our vehicle and planned to fix our car for us, also helped us get a hotel in Tullahoma. One of the problems was that we had a large dog with us, and there wasn't a hotel that allowed pets, but the nice gentleman helped us sneak in the dog. We got to the room, but when we opened the door, the mechanic freaked out saying, "What have I gotten you into?" There was a large blood red stain all over the bathroom counter. We take a closer look and realize it was just fingernail polish. Anyway, the hotel was a hole, and this was a bad start to our spring break, so we got super baked and watched Ren and Stimpy. Luckily, it was the altruists episode with the gorilla. I was at a hotel in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and everything about the place was unsure right off the bat, but there was only that hotel nearby, so I stayed. Get to my room and pull the sheets back from the bed, and there were actual human feces under it. They wouldn't let me change rooms due to there being no space, and so they had someone come to change the sheets for me and gave me a free meal at the restaurant that was a part of the hotel. So, I went down and had some dinner, and then I ended up with the worst food poisoning of my life. I thought I was going to die, it was so bad. Needless to say, the whole experience was awful. Was in Bali for a 4-day stay, and we rented a pretty nice villa with its own pool, which is pretty common there. The bathroom connected to the room was a semi-outdoor bathroom. The top was covered, but the two ends of the bathroom were exposed to the elements. It was surrounded by a high wall, so you had privacy, but when you were showering it definitely felt like you were doing it outside. It wasn't raining, so I was okay with it, but during the shower later that night, I looked down at my feet and saw little squirmy things on the shower floor. Looked further and immediately was disgusted out. Worms were coming out of the shower floor, enticed by the water from the shower. It was one of those stone/rock floors, not concrete. That wasn't even the worst of it. There wasn't a shower screen due to it being an outdoor shower, so when you showered for a while, a stream of water started heading towards the bedroom floor. The whole bedroom floor was soaked, and I had to build a retaining wall of towels to prevent water from traveling into the bedroom in later showers. And no, we couldn't return to the villa as we'd already paid for it, being a large group of people and me having the only problematic bathroom. I just put up with it. Pensive face, but that definitely put a bummer on the holiday. Recently stopped south of Savannah on my way down to Florida. Didn't get to the hotel till about 11:30 p.m. Checked in and went to the room. Something smelled like chemicals, and I started looking around. There was a massive crack in the wall of the bathroom that carried into the main part of the room. Someone had tried sealing it with tons of sealant. So, I figured that was the smell and went to lie down and go to bed. About 4 a.m. I woke up and was hallucinating. Whatever they used to seal the wall was curing and emitting fumes, I guess. Was too paranoid to do anything else, so I cracked the window and laid there in the bed for about 3 hours until I fell asleep again for about 2 more hours. Got up and checked out. I would have reprimanded them about it, but $30 is cheaper than drugs, and it came with a room for the night. Stayed at Motel 6, off the highway in Austin, Texas, with a friend of mine. We spent most of the night out drinking, then headed back to the hotel to drink some more and eat cake before passing. Don't ask me why we were eating cake, my friend just bought it at the store when we went on the liquor run. Anyway, we eventually passed out, leaving the room a disaster. I woke and looked over at the table next to the bed and it was crawling. The ants were all over my plate, had crawled up and into the bottle of tequila. There were probably 100 dead ones in the bottle already. Manager refused a refund, said it was our fault for leaving food out. Went to Amsterdam with the lass and we got upgraded to the only room with a balcony on arrival. Lush room, too many beds than we had planned to use. I decided to Google it the next day and found out it had just reopened that month after somebody flung themselves over the balcony onto the street below. Never made use of the balcony. I'm scared of heights as it is. I got like $19.99 a night at a Days Inn in Colorado Springs. What a rate! Booked it for all 4 nights of my stay. In the lobby, there's an on-site massage service. That's strange. Got to the room, peephole is just missing, gone. Door frame shows signs of a previous break. Enter the room. There's a spring, of all things, on top of the bed. Missing light bulbs from 2 out of the 3 lamps. The shower drain cover is gone, revealing just a dark hole which I assume is a rat subway of some sort. And still, I stay the night. But the next room is very loud, womp, some party going down on Tuesday night. Go outside later to have a smoke and next room's door is open, 2 hookers and 3 super skeezy guys going in and out of the room. Hey! 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 I barricaded the door that night and checked out the next day, to pay $49.99 at the completely vanilla Hampton Inn just up the road. Stayed at a Quality Inn in Long Beach. Got to the room, turned on the lights and the wall moved. Cockroaches everywhere. They moved us to the other side of the hotel in a different room. There's bloodstains on the bed, wall, and the hot water weren't working. Tried to nope out of there, but every hotel in the area was full of the event going on at the time. House cleaning deep cleaned the bloody room and we stayed for free. They had the gall to email me to take back the 1-star review I left and that they would comp another weekend on them. Toledo, Ohio. The room had a cricket infestation. Had to change rooms in the middle of the night. To this day I hate crickets. King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. The wall below the window had wallpaper hanging, but no drywall or insulation. Just wallpaper and the back of the outside wall. Thai, Brighton, UK. Stayed at a bed and breakfast. Fairly sure I was not the only person that used those sheets. Thai, Cannes, France. We paid for a private bath. I guess having a ceiling on the bath costs extra. We could shoot the other person with the shower head. It was actually pretty entertaining. Turkoglu, Kyrgyzstan. New hotel. Nice rooms. Big communal area with computers and TV. Literally no one else was there. So, what's wrong? The guy working there who wasn't there half the time locked the 10-foot-tall gate, essentially trapping me inside. Eventually climbed out a window and over a fence into someone's yard, all the while the neighbor was watching me. We both nodded as I exited his property. The worst part though is the Turkoglu Dam was closed to tourists. On a trip to FL wife, 4 kids under 7 and me ready for arrest. Called ahead to a hotel in Georgia. Say they have a suite with 2 fold-out couches. I say okay, we'll be there in an hour. Get there. The manager takes us to the room. He's flabbergasted that there is only a single fold-out chair. He grabs a cot. We figure out who's sleeping where. Feel okay now, we'll make this work. Kids situated start to get in our bed. Yellow stains on sheets. Walk to the front desk to ask for new sheet. It's late, I'll take care of it. Bring me the wrong size sheet. Bring the right sheet. Head to my room. Strip bed, bloodstains on mattress pad. Head back to the front desk with pad. 2 more trips to the housekeeping supply room and we have what we need. Bed made, try not to think about it. Sleep. Drive to FL next day. At least we got a discount on the room. 2 hours into the middle of BFE, North Dakota, we stayed at a roadside motel. All ground level with wood paneling everywhere. Everything was from the cheap side of the 70s. It was a long trip up there and I wanted a shower, so I took one. When I went to dry off, all I could find were very thin washcloths, so I yelled to my wife that I couldn't find the towels. She said, "They're folded up on the rack." I told her that there were only the wash clothes. When she yelled back that those were them, I unfolded one and put it in front of my groin, which it barely covered. I immediately cracked up laughing so much I was crying. All I could picture was my father-in-law trying to dry off his exceptionally bulky frame with one. Hell, it still makes me LOL. I was staying at a hotel in Chelsea, New York for a bachelorette party in 2006-ish. They had us in a room that was in the basement and had 3 full-size beds, and there were 6 of us. The stairs down to it were really narrow and the owner walked us down and unlocked a door in front of our door with a padlock. Behind it was your standard hotel door and room. Asked about the padlock and he said it was an old building and if you didn't lock it would bang because of the draft of the window in the hallway. He also said it stays open obviously when guests are there, and they have a hinge on the wall to keep it from banging. The window in the hallway was full length and had that glass you'd find in a bathroom shower that you can't really see in or out of well. Also, you could see at the bottom trash and or leaves piled up against it about a foot high. It was the alleyway. Already creeped out for assorted reasons, I decide to drag my drunk ass back early and alone. I walk toward the staircase and there is a man standing in the window and he waves at me. I run back to reception and she's like, "Oh, you're in the basement? That's normal. Oh, also let me unlock your padlock so you can get in your room." I asked for a full refund and slept in the lobby with everyone's luggage. They came back slowly and slept on couches. I drove everyone home at about 6 a.m. From then on out, I always spent more on rooms and checked out travel sites. It was in Yreka, California. The guy who owned the place pretended not to speak English. There was no phone, no locks on the door, the DID didn't work. It was filthy. Bugs and roaches are a given. There was mold everywhere and the bathroom window that backed to a trash alley did not shut. You could hear people walking around back there at night. If you wanted to make a phone call, you had to go to the front office, hope someone there wasn't pretending to not speak English, ask to make a call, and stand there, using the short, tethered 1980s phone while the desk attendant stood 2 feet from you, and if it was the man, give you filthy looks. Absolutely no part of this motel room was how a motel room should be. From safety, to even basics like clean sheets, it failed. It was literally the only place in town, and I was stuck there 3 days. I traveled on business a lot when I was in my mid-20s. I checked into my regular hotel room and did my work for Saturday, came back after dinner and was settling in when I had a knock at the door. I don't ever answer unless I'm expecting someone, like someone I'm traveling with or staff from downstairs. Anyway, 5 minutes later, I got another knock and I'm like, WTF? I don't answer and then another few minutes go by and there's another knock. I call down to the front desk and ask for security to come by and look around because I keep getting knocks on my door. About 10 minutes later, the same front desk person knocked on my door and I opened it. Turns out they rented a room to the local driver's ed course, and this was their regular room every Saturday night for training. Somehow I had received their room that was listed in their details. I was really baffled because all the driver's ed I knew was at the local JC or had an office. They put a few rooms down this week. The front desk lady asked if I wanted to move, and I was like, yeah. They put me on the other side of the building and no more knocks. I also used to stay at Motel 6 until I saw it on the news that a meth lab had blown up in one of the rooms. I was not surprised. Hilton Garden Inn in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It is right next to the interstate and built like a cheap McMansion. There is no room in the entire hotel where you won't hear road noise all night long. If you complain, they'll suggest you use a white noise machine. Just stay in the Sheraton, Courtyard Marriott, or Holiday Inn if you're ever in Ann Arbor. They're far enough from the road that you won't be up all night listening to road noise. Luckily, this happened to my parents, sorry Mom and Dad, and not me, but they came to visit me in Austin, Texas, but got an airbob in the next town over. It was labeled as a cozy cabin and was essentially a room attached to a barn on someone's property. I went with them to check in and it seemed rustic, but not too bad. We noticed a few flies and the lady who owned it was just like roll up a magazine and smack me. Since it was kind of out in the more rural outskirts of town, I wasn't surprised, but later on at night they ended up leaving and checking into a hotel. Increased flies kept coming in the room as well as the palmetto bugs aka giant flying roaches, and they said it was like a scene from a horror movie. There were probably around 200 or so when they left, plus the other assortment of bugs. They called the Airbnb lady and said they were leaving because of the plague of bugs and her solution was to go to Walmart and get an electronic fly swatter. By that time they checked into a hotel and luckily AirBob is fairly good at understanding badly and gave them a refund and $25 or something. I traveled for work sometimes, and one week I drove all over the state to visit multiple branches of the same company. I always stayed at the same chain because that's who my employer had a rate agreement with. The first night, I ended up in a hotel room that was straight out of a nightmare. Not only was it right next to the airport, but I also swear the runway backed up to the room because every jet that took off shook the whole room. I was doing before/after hours work, so I was sleeping, just not that day, not with all the noise. The carpet and walls were stained, the room stank, and the bathroom was absolutely decrepit. I finally got a couple of hours sleep after getting back from a job, and when I woke in the morning I found out that the shower head was so clogged with crud that it barely trickled any water out. I was so past that I almost ditched the reservation that I had made at the same chain the next night in a different city and paid out of pocket for a room. I'm glad I didn't, because it was a hotel on a golf course that was absolutely stellar. The room was super clean, and the bed was like sleeping in the warm embrace of a fluffy cotton mistress. I worked on a Warped Tour a few years ago, until my van broke down. The band continued on the tour, and I stayed at a hotel outside of Atlanta until I could get the van fixed. It was a little Motel 6, one TV channel, about $40 a night, enough noises to make one suspect work, but I was psyched about the bathtub and the Taco Bell across the street. I was heartbroken to be missing the adventure of the tour, and I spent about 3 days sitting in that bathtub, drinking leftover Dobra, occasionally wandering across the road for a burrito. After 3 days, I'd finally found a mechanic I could afford, and I decided to wait until morning to take off. As I began to nod off, I heard an incredibly loud blam. Then a moment later blam. BLAM. Half awake and completely drunk, I rolled onto the floor, and crawled over to the window. I see a guy in a white tank top holding a shotgun, turn and take off across the parking lot. I crawled back to the phone and called the front desk, who responded immediately with "I heard it, I called the cops." Staying low, I went back to the window and saw the police officers arrive, and one waved at me to get away from the window. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. An officer told me that they'd forgotten to bring or didn't have enough evidence tags, and might I have some notebook paper they could use to mark where the shell casings fell? A few months later, I got a phone call from a court in Georgia asking if I wouldn't mind providing evidence. Apparently, there had been a worker next door, and one of her clients had taken umbrage, just fired some shots into the hotel room next to mine. Everyone was fine, but hell. What a road trip. I arrived at what was supposed to be a nice Sheraton, got checked in and headed up to my room. You ever been to one of those cheap hotels with the things on the doors to keep them from being pried open and broken into? Yes, that's what I expect out of a cheap hotel, but I got at a Sheraton. So, I go into the room and as soon as my door closes, 2 dogs in the next room start barking. I guess I wasn't aware that the 8th floor of Sheraton hotels was pet-friendly. So, I unpack for the night and every time a door closes in the hallway, the hounds of hell start baying. 30 minutes into settling in and hoping the dogs would settle down before I had to call the front desk, I noticed my laptop was almost out of juice. I looked over at the lamp and I sighed because it wasn't the kind that had the outlet on the front. I looked behind the nightstand and saw there are more outlets to reach down to plug in the laptop charger and immediately stick my hand in lube that someone had wiped on the edge before a good old time in the bed. I used every bit of soap in the room, every towel, just trying to convince myself that my hands were clean. I called down to the desk and tried to explain what has just happened. The first guy on the phone was like, "You stuck your hand in what?" To which I could only respond with, "You heard me." The manager was equally dumbfounded, but when I asked for a new room, conceded. I get everything packed up and as I open the door, there is a housekeeper about to open it to verify my claims. She starts looking and goes, "I don't see anything," in the condescending grandmother sort of tone. I said, "See where the mattress meets the nightstand, right over there." The sticks her hand over there and this horrified look comes on her face that must have mimicked mine and the guy with the key to my new room hands me the key. I leave it to let them sort it out. I look at my room key number and sigh. It was on the other side of the dog room. Worst stay at a hotel ever. I was in Iceland with a friend once and was staying at a certain hotel in Reykjavik. The reviews were good, and it looked nice, so we were quite surprised when we found that there was pubic hair everywhere in between the beds and a used condom inside the guest booklet. The toilet paper was crusty, brown, and dodgy and there was a big bloody hole in the toilet door for some reason. Our hotel door didn't lock and in the toilet there was a big waiting for us. The lamp above my bed had smoke coming out of it and smelt like it was burning. At the bar, everything tasted like a pass. Oh, and there was some dried poo on the shower tile. WTF. Privately owned hotel in Youngstown, Ohio, just off I-80. It looked decent outside, the office was clean and fairly new. Checked in and they gave us a room around the back. The curtain was half off, the rug was threadbare, the couch was filthy, the sheets were worn thin with cigarette burn holes. My husband said, "Look up." There were boogers on the ceiling above the bed. I hadn't set anything down yet, so I went back to the office. Somehow I didn't see the no refund policy. They gave us a room next to the office. It was clean, in comparison, but so old with gross carpeting. We stacked the blankets and pillows on a chair, zipped up our hoodies, hoods up, shoes still on, lay her on the bed, slept a few hours and left. We have never stopped at a no-name hotel since, without asking to see our room before we paid. So, this was a little cheap motel in downtown LA, sometime in November I believe. That'll be relevant later. The first thing I did after arriving in the city was pull into a parking lot and text my now ex-boyfriend, the native Angelian, to see if he'd had any better luck finding the place. He did. And right off the bat, he mentioned that he's not sure he's comfortable staying there. We'd basically had nothing but the motels up till now, so I sort of dismissed that for the time being and asked if he could point me in the right direction so I could see for myself. The first thing I noticed upon arrival was that, evidently, downtown LA was this place's code for I don't even want to walk alone here in broad daylight. The second thing I noticed, no parking. No, wait, there it was, behind a wall with a locked gate, and with only enough room for one row of, small, cars. That was maybe half as many spots as there were rooms. If you got back to the motel too late in the day, you were forced to park directly behind another car. Really, this is what the front desk guy said to do, leaving them no room to back out and you to be woken up at 7 in the morning to move it if the guy you blocked in happened to have somewhere to be. That was just the lot. At this point, the ex was actually really nervous about the place, the fact that the interior was freezing as cold, because they left the back door open all the time in November, and had obviously inspired The Shining did not help. I'm a little bit peeved at this point that he couldn't have scoped the place out when I booked it 2 weeks ago, but I let it go and ask if I can cancel the room. $200 cancellation fee. We couldn't do that. That was like 2/3 the price of if we decided to stay, if not more, and we wouldn't be able to afford anywhere else. All right. Fine. We took it. The room was on the second story, and the floor had more than one huge soft spot. We kept stubbing our toes if we had to pee in the middle of the night because the disconcertingly grimy/minuscule bathroom was raised up a few inches from the rest, and the step was behind the door, so it didn't quite close all the way. Whoever came in to clean, well, didn't ever, but they did keep turning off the heater and opening all our windows. Why? So that we both needed jackets for 10 minutes whenever one/both of us got back to the room. There were a ton of other things wrong, rude staff being one of them.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.